Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Wilkins, Emergency Response Coordinator for Tri-Counties Regional Center, and welcome to our first lesson in the Rescue Tri-Counties program. This is going to be our first lesson in the mitigation series. This is going to be on conducting home assessments. So it is important to be aware of the hazards that threaten the home of the person that you care for or provide services to. This training can also be applied to your own home as well. Knowing the hazards and risks you face is an important first step in mitigating the impacts of disasters. Today's lesson will cover the importance of conducting a home assessment, which is the most likely location we will find ourselves at when disaster strikes, and for this reason, it is the first topic we will cover. Before we begin the training, here is a quick overview of today's lesson. This lesson will cover the following topics in more detail: risk assessment, hazards in our area, that is the Tri-Counties Regional Center catchment area, common hazards in the home, conducting a home assessment, a few scenarios and examples, and additional resources. So what is a home assessment and why is it important? According to FEMA, conducting a risk assessment is the process of measuring the potential loss of life, personal injury, economic injury, and property damage resulting from hazards. It is important to identify the hazards that threaten your client's residence so you can help them prepare and take measures to reduce potential impacts of disaster. It is also important to consider the risks inside their home, such as house fires, as well as those outside the home, like a wildfire. By the end of this training, you should be able to identify the hazards in your client's area, define the different types of hazards, identify barriers to evacuations and responders, identify mitigation strategies to reduce impacts, conduct a risk assessment of the home, and know where to find additional resources. There are three different types of hazards that FEMA recognizes. The first are natural hazards, which are those related to weather patterns and/or physical characteristics of an area that occur repeatedly in the same geographical locations. The second are technological hazards, which are those originating from technological or industrial accidents, infrastructure failures, or certain human activities that may cause loss of life or injury, property damage, social and economic disruption, or environmental degradation, and often come with little to no warning. And lastly, we have human-caused hazards, which are hazards that arise from deliberate, intentional human actions to threaten or harm the well-being of others. With that said, let's cover some examples of each types of these hazards. Natural hazards are things like floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, and severe storms. In the top left is a photo of two vehicles that are partially submerged in floodwaters in Santa Barbara off the 101. As you can see, the water is up to the wheel well. In the top right, there is some earthquake damage to a partially collapsed road. I don't recall exactly where that occurred when I pulled the picture, but that was within our catchment area. The bottom left is a large tornado. That's obviously not here in our area. However, it is possible to have small tornadoes in San Luis Obispo County in February 2024. There were two small tornadoes that touched down and caused a little bit of damage, but they were not nearly the size of this one. They were one of the smallest tornadoes possible. And in the bottom right, there is lightning strikes coming down from clouds over the hills of Santa Barbara. If you're taking the picture, it would be from somebody that was on a boat looking towards the mountains. Technological hazards include hazmat, which is hazardous materials incidents, nuclear power plants, train derailments, and oil spills or fires. The top left photo shows an aerial view of the mission incident in Santa Paula. Here, a vacuum truck was doing some off-the-books work and combining chemicals. The chemicals eventually exploded and caused a fire that created a large-scale hazmat incident that resulted in the medical retirement of a few firefighters and the loss of the fire engine that is near the fire in this image. I was actually working in dispatch for Ventura County Fire when this incident occurred. The top right photo is the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant near Avila Beach in San Luis Obispo County. The bottom left photo is from the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio in 2023, where 38 freight cars caught fire and released a large amount of toxic smoke and also infiltrated the waterways. The bottom right photo is from the BP Oil Deepwater Horizon platform in the Gulf of Mexico that caught fire in 2010 and resulted in 11 deaths and 210 million gallons of crude oil spilling into the ocean, which was the worst oil spill in recorded history. Human-caused hazards are things like mass shootings, terrorist attacks, sabotage of critical infrastructure via cyber attacks, and rioting or civil unrest. This slide shows the hazards that the County of Ventura and its local government partners have identified. Those hazards are dam failure, drought, earthquake, flood, landslide, sea level rise and coastal erosion, severe storms, severe weather, tsunami, wildfire, climate change, agricultural and biological hazards, and pandemic. This slide shows the hazards that the County of Santa Barbara and its local government partners identified. Those hazards are wildfire, drought and water shortage, earthquake and liquefaction, flood, mud flow and debris flow, coastal hazards, landslide, geologic hazards, tsunami, extreme heat or freeze, windstorm, hailstorm, tornado, hurricane, pandemic or public health emergency, cyber threats, invasive species, civil disturbances, agricultural pests, terrorism, well stimulation and hydraulic fracturing, energy shortage and resiliency, hazardous materials release, dam failure, natural gas pipeline rupture and storage facility incidents, train accident, aircraft crash, oil spill, levee failure, and radiological accidents. This slide shows the hazards that the County of San Luis Obispo and its local partners have identified. Under adverse weather, they've identified general adverse weather, thunderstorms, heavy rain, dense fog, and freezing, high wind and tornadoes, and extreme heat. The other hazards are agricultural pest infestation, plant disease, marine invasive species and tree mortality, naturally occurring biological agents, coastal storm, erosion and sea level rise, dam incidents, drought and water shortage, earthquakes, faults and liquefaction, flooding, landslides and debris flows, soil hazards, specifically land subsidence, tsunami and sage. Sage is a standing wave in an enclosed or partially enclosed body of water, wildfires, hazardous materials incidents, specifically the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, is also mentioned. There are hazards present in the home of those you provide services to that you should be aware of. These hazards can make it hard for emergency responders to reach your clients in a disaster. These barriers can also complicate evacuations during an emergency. Make sure to assess the home of your client with them when possible and consider their unique needs when identifying these potential barriers. We will cover each of the above listed barriers in the next few slides. As we cover these barriers, consider each from two possible scenarios. One, you are with them when the disaster strikes, and two, they are by themselves and need to be prepared until you arrive, if possible, or first responders need to assist. These barriers are physical, structural, communication, logistical, social, behavioral, and technological. Physical barriers can delay responders getting to your client and may also prevent them from evacuating. For this reason, you should assess the potential physical risks near their home or place of residence. When thinking about downed trees, is there a large tree that could block their driveway? What if there are wheelchair accessible cars in the garage and the tree falls in the garage? For gates, what if they are trapped in their home and have a locked gate? Can they hide a key in the lockbox and provide the code to responders, a friend, or a family member? Typically, you can call the local fire and police departments and have them record vital information such as the location of a key or a combination to store in their computer system. So when they do respond, they can easily access the home and get to your client if you aren't there. Some other barriers to consider are debris, flooded or blocked streets. This is not a complete list, this is just a few physical barriers to get you thinking. Structural barriers can also delay responders getting to your client and may also prevent them from evacuating. For this reason, you should identify existing structural risks and consider their potential risks. Is there a retaining wall that could fall on or near their property? If so, where would it most likely occur? Does it appear to be in need of repair or is it showing early signs of failure? Do they have a narrow staircase that makes accessing them with special needed equipment hard? Do they have a steep or winding driveway that may make it difficult for a fire engine to access their home? If so, what happens if that becomes blocked? Do they have a backup? Are there any eaves or overhangs that could fail in an earthquake, severe weather, or by other means? If so, do they have alternate escape plans? Not all barriers are physical in nature. Communication issues may arise when contacting emergency resources or communicating with responders after arriving. Planning for this and thinking about it ahead of time is essential. These can also be encountered if they must evacuate and find themselves in an evacuation shelter. What if English is not the language of choice? Yes, I understand this training is in English, but what if the person you are caring for is not as comfortable with English and you can't make it to them or you become separated? For those in the deaf and hard of hearing community, do they have a plan to communicate with responders? Here at TCRC, we have one such initiative that is designed to be used for this. We have handy talker cards that we distributed to some pre-identified individuals, and we may have some booklets remaining to aid in communication. What if they rely on communication equipment such as the one pictured or something similar? Do they have a backup if it is lost or damaged during a disaster? What if they lose power for an extended time and it loses its charge? Have a plan for this. Lastly, misinformation can be a barrier as well. What if evacuation orders have been issued, but the neighbor tells them it's only voluntary? It is good to look to official sources for information during disasters. Look at the picture in the bottom right. In this example, the person didn't believe that the road close signs were needed because they couldn't see the road had collapsed ahead and it was dark. They should have assumed the road was blocked for a reason, even if they heard the road closures had been lifted. Remember, confirm, confirm, confirm. There can also be logistical barriers for your client and emergency responders. What if they rely on special transportation that requires wheelchair accessibility? What if they rely on public transportation? How will they evacuate and what is their backup plan? What if they rely on electricity and don't have backup power? What if a critical battery dies and they need to be moved up or downstairs? Most responders will have access to a stair chair. What will they do in the meantime? Affordable evacuation sleds can be purchased online or in certain stores for these scenarios as a backup. What if the community is facing a large-scale disaster such as a large earthquake, wildfire, or flood? Unfortunately, it is not a matter of if, but when. Emergency responders could be overwhelmed and there may be limited resources that can only respond to high priority calls. Likely, they will not be able to wait and will need to plan to self-rescue in some instances. If they are trapped in their home or have to leave quickly, do they have enough food, water, and medications to last a few days? If not, start working with them to build up those supplies and have them buy a few extra items each time they go to the grocery store to save an emergency. Don't worry, we will cover this in more detail in the Make a Go Kit training. According to the National Institute of Health, another barrier to consider is the unique social and behavioral challenges often found in the community served by TCRC. As a result, it is important to keep this in mind as well and plan how to overcome these barriers. Some individuals may distrust people they do not know, even if they wear a uniform. This can be based on many things, such as previous negative interactions with first responders or general distrust. The mere presence of first responders can trigger stress in some individuals. Many individuals we serve don't do well in large evacuation shelter due to the possibility that their unique needs may not be met. Even though evacuation shelters must be accessible under ADA requirements, that does not mean that they will have things like wheelchair accessible showers. In addition, for individuals on the autism spectrum, these settings can result in sensory overloads that are not conducive to their flourishing. Everyone experiences some form of stress and anxiety. In extreme settings, the fight or flight reflex may come on so strongly that the person loses their ability to react or take action. This reaction is commonly referred to as freezing. Many individuals with IDD rely heavily on their routine. When their routine is interrupted, it can cause extreme stress, anxiety, and behavioral issues. Therefore, it is very important to develop a strategy to deal with the disruptions that disasters can bring. There are also technological barriers that can impede your client's ability to evacuate or interfere with first responders. What if they rely on a powered wheelchair or other mobility device and cannot use it due to floodwaters, mud debris, or uneven surfaces? What if an access ramp has become blocked or a powered lift has been damaged? Do they have a backup? For example, a manual wheelchair or mobility device with oversized wheels to navigate difficult terrain would be a good idea to have. What if they rely on the internet or wired phone lines for some of their assistive technology? Do they have a manual backup or alternative plan? These are things to think about. What if there is a power outage? Do they have backup batteries? Are they charged? Do they have a generator or alternate source of power? What if they have spare batteries but they are dead, expired, or damaged? Thorough preparation and planning with them is important so you can build in layers of redundancy so that they can adapt in the moment. Conducting a risk assessment is not as difficult as you may think. It is best to do it together with your client and their family or roommate. Make sure you allot enough time as you don't want to feel rushed doing this. In the following slides, we will go over some basic steps to get you started. You can also reach out to professionals if you don't feel comfortable. Great resources would be your local Red Cross, fire station, community-based organizations, or your local regional center emergency coordinator. The first step is to gather up some supplies you will need to conduct a risk assessment. It's a good idea to bring a notepad to write them down, or if you prefer, a laptop or a tablet to capture them digitally. It's also good to bring a camera. That way you can document specific concerns and take photos of things. This can also help later on with insurance claims. It's also good to have a flashlight for areas with poor lighting. With modern cell phones, you can just bring a cell phone and do all of these on the same device if you prefer. It's also good to have a list of the hazards present in your area and use that to identify secondary risks so you can take that secondary risk and determine how it may specifically impact their home. So, for example, if they have power lines nearby and high winds are a concern, if those power lines were to go down, where could they likely go? Would it be possibly in their yard or on their house, or maybe to their neighbor's house? Just something to consider. Once we've gathered our supplies, we're going to conduct an exterior walk, starting with the outside of the home, and we're going to be looking for things like nearby utility lines, trees, any existing damage, any objects that could block or impede access, or any other accessibility issues. We're going to start by standing in front of the house, property, apartment, or wherever they live, and you're going to want to look around as if you are a first responder who is called here. Let's use this home, for example, in the picture. Imagine a strong wind event and this tree is in their yard. Is it possible that one of the hazards they could face could cause a tree to fall? If it did, where could it fall? Could it fall in the house like we see here, or perhaps block a driveway? Are there power lines nearby? Do they have a lot of items lying out that make it hard to get in or out of some parts of the home? These are the kinds of things to take note as you walk around with your client. Make sure that your exterior walk ends where you started it to make sure you don't miss anything. Remember, hazards don't have to be on their property, they could also be nearby in a neighbor's yard. So once you and your client have done an exterior walk, it's time to go inside. Start at the front or main door used to access their living space. Just pick a route and do a basic walkthrough of the house looking for anything that really stands out. Is there a large crack in the wall that could cause a problem if there was an earthquake? It's important to walk through as the home normally is. This is because hardly any of our homes are perfectly neat and clean all the time. The picture here shows an example of a hoarder's home. It is more likely than not that the stacked objects in this picture remain in place at all times. Look for items that make hallways or doorways narrow, or objects that could fall in an earthquake. See if your client would be okay with moving these objects or getting rid of them if they don't have an immediate need for them. There is no need to spend several minutes in one room. This will be done later in more detail. This initial walkthrough is just meant to identify the big things that need to be addressed. Now that the initial walkthrough has been completed, you and your client will do a methodical search for hazards. Pick a room and spend at least 5 minutes looking for anything preventing them from quickly evacuating or delaying first responders from getting to them. If furniture is in the way, is there a better way to arrange the furniture to create more room? If so, make a note for later. We don't need to fix things now unless they are an immediate hazard. Examples of an immediate hazard are a bunched up rug, which could cause someone to trip. In the moment, flatten it out so that no one trips over it or gets a wheel from a wheelchair caught in it. If the room is large, spend more time opening drawers and closets, looking behind and under things, and really taking a good look for hazards. Go room by room until you and your client end up where you started. Now you're going to do a quick walk for any safety equipment that they may or may not have. Are their smoke detectors working? What about the carbon monoxide detector? Do they have an assistive device like a bed shaker? If so, test it to make sure it works. If they have a fire extinguisher, ensure it is still charged by confirming the arrow is in the green. If there is an inspection date, ensure it's been inspected recently. Do they have emergency supplies? If so, ensure nothing is expired. If it is, note it to replace it later. Do they have specific medical needs and information that is important for someone responding to help them know? If so, consider placing it on or near the refrigerator, as this is a common place that first responders are trained to look for this kind of information. Okay, by now you and your client should have a list of hazards. Maybe it's a long list, or perhaps it's a short list. Next, you both should look at it and identify which hazards pose the greatest risk, and if so, what is the probability of encountering this risk? Focus on the ones that are more likely to occur. Also, are there some easy fixes like getting some rug tape to tape a rug down, a screw that needs to be tightened, or a battery that needs replacing? If so, do these things together if you can and check it off your list now. Next, determine what hazards you and your client can tackle and which things may require a skilled professional to handle, such as inspecting a crack in the foundation. It's important to be realistic and acknowledge your limitations here. It's a good idea to reassess every year to make sure the measures taken continue to work and to see if any new hazards have popped up. I also wanted to mention that it is important to listen to your client and ensure that this process is conducted in a person-centered approach. Ensure you are listening to what is important to them, while ensuring the overall assessment also covers what is important for them. Make sure you both agree on the risks and hazards and the severity of the threat they pose, as well as the likelihood they will occur. Take the time to explain areas of disagreement and why they are important if they don't agree. Ultimately, it is their choice, and you can only do so much in your advocacy for them as their service provider. So now that we know how to do a basic home assessment, what can you and your client do about what you have found? Here are a few suggestions based on some examples we used. We have already discussed a few minor mitigation strategies, but here are a few more. You can remove hazards like trees or have them trimmed, clear pathways, secure heavy objects and furniture, install flexible gas connectors to reduce the risk of fire following an earthquake, anchor water heaters to the wall to prevent them from tipping and resulting in gas or water leaks, install smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors to allow for early hazard detection, replace damaged electrical wiring or outlets, which will reduce fire risk, install fire-resistant roofing or siding to help reduce wildfire vulnerability, or hire a handyman or a contractor if done to fix hazard-related issues like structural weaknesses. Some are bigger lifts than others, and some may have heftier price tags, like hiring a professional. As I stated earlier, it is essential to focus on the most serious risk and address those first. The smaller ones, or the less severe ones, can be addressed later if they can wait. Don't forget that you and your client need to further categorize items on the list as wants versus need. Now, let's see if we can apply what we've learned so far to two scenarios. Imagine you and your client are standing in front of their home, and it's the home in the picture on the screen. What hazards do you see here? I'll give you about 30 seconds before going over a few that I observed. Let's start with the trees. So when I'm looking at the tree in the front yard, it looks to be tall enough that if it were to fall, it would reach the furthest portions of the house. The tree closest to the street could fall down and block the driveway. Now you can't see them all here, but the street is lined with large trees that could block the road in both directions. What about the power lines? The power lines to the rear of the house are also hazards. They could fall on the home or in the backyard and start a fire or shock someone if they were to come in contact with them. Look at the walls. The brick wall to the left of the house could also fall during an earthquake and block access to the side yard. Let's look at the overhang of the home. So the overhang on the front of the house could also collapse and create a delay for first responders entering or leaving the home, or anybody within the home from entering or leaving the home. For our second scenario, imagine this is your client's home and you're with them, and the power goes out, and they receive an alert that they must evacuate due to a disaster. Instead of waiting for about 30 seconds, I'll have you go ahead and pause the video right now and take a look at some of the hazards you see. Once you've got a list of hazards, go ahead and hit play. Welcome back. So the most apparent hazard is the clutter that will make navigating difficult if you and your client are rushing to gather items that can't be replaced. Both of you could trip or not be able to navigate a wheelchair around some of these items. The cabinets are also open with several glass items. If there was an earthquake, these could fall, break, and create a hazard. What if either of you don't have shoes on and you can't get to your shoes? Now, imagine your client is stuck in their home, you are on the way over, and first responders are coming to assist them. If they are hurt, it will be hard to navigate a stretcher in the home. But if they left their medication list on the table, do you think it will be easy for first responders to find it in time? What about navigating with their other gear that is bulky? This is for the first responders. Is there anything else? Now, let's see some mitigation strategies in action with the following video.
This is the Brickyard, a Sacramento fire training facility. Our visit to the Brickyard might change the look of your front and backyard.
Here, very typical construction.
Ann Cope is part of a consortium of building engineers, fire pros, and insurance groups that built 2 microcosm homes side by side. Their goal is to burn them. Well, one of them. The point here is the wildfire prepared house on the right is doing things right. Fire-resistant siding, defensible space, sealed eaves, a metal fence where it meets the house, and no plants next to the walls.
Everything within these first 5 feet is non-combustible.
The house on the left, however, is left to burn. Intentionally, it has traditional, easily combustible wood siding, common mulch touching the siding, an old-school wooden fence, shrubs right up against the wall, and open eaves.
So if anything is burning underneath them, all that heat's going to go right up into those structural pieces.
Like the roof.
We can stop the fingers of wildfire.
After a short introduction,
firefighters are getting set up with drip torches.
Firefighters simultaneously light tiny flames at both houses.
The fire in the bark here simulating embers.
Within about 12 minutes, a smoky, roaring, and unmistakable difference. The fire on the left burned so hot, so fast, it temporarily overheated our cameras, even though we were several yards away. The house collapsed while our cameras were cooling. Luckily, one of the hosts shared this clip with us. Engineers knew exactly how this would go down. Literally. They knew the house on the right would survive because they've done this demo in a lab and written research papers. Now they're taking this dramatic display on the road.
The resources that you see here are linked on the TCRC website and also available in the link in the description to this video. These resources will go over guidance on analyzing hazards from FEMA. I've also linked our emergency resources page on our website. I've also included a risk assessment table template from FEMA that you can use in your home assessment. And then there's also a brochure there about protecting your property from FEMA. So this would be the time where you could ask questions if I was presenting this live in person or live on a webinar, but since you're watching the recorded version, please send any questions you have to the TCRC ERC. My contact information can be found on this slide. Just go ahead and pause it so you can write it down. And just to summarize what we've covered in today's lesson, we covered the different types of hazards, the hazards in your client's area, potential barriers to evacuation and arriving first responders, how to conduct a basic home hazard assessment, mitigation strategies for those hazards, and additional resources to help you identify hazards to protect your client and their home. With that said, thank you so much for your time and your commitment to safety and disaster preparedness. I welcome any and all feedback on this training. And lastly, I thought it was important to include the reference material for this training. You can find the links for this on the TCRC website as well as in the video description.